Good day, everybody. My name is Dr. Jairo Garcia. I reside in Atlanta, Georgia, the ancestral land of the Cherokee, Muskogee, and Chickasaw people. And today, I honor them and, as past and present custodians of this territory. I am the Executive Director of Urban Climate Nexus and lecturer in climate policies and sustainable cities at the Georgia Institute of Technology and Johns Hopkins University. My areas of expertise are in urban sustainability and climate change. It's a great honor for me to be the master of ceremony for the North America Mayoral reception at this 2021 United Nations Habitat Global Covenant of Mayors Innovate for Cities Conference. Today, we are honored to count with the intervention of former Vice President Al Gore and the interventions of the Mayor of Savannah, Honorable Van Jones II, Honorable Mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and Honorable Mayor of Tampa, Jane Castor. After the intervention of Mr. Al Gore and Honorable Mayors of Savannah, Atlanta, and Tampa, the regional curators, Dr. Kim Cobb with the Georgia Institute of Technology and Alicia Scott with Partnership for Southern Equity, will discuss some of the points presented by the key speakers from the academic / scientific and socially / equity perspectives. I'm going to share my screen. The first intervention is by Mr. Al Gore, former Vice President of the United States and Nobel Peace Prize. Mr. Al Gore is well recognized internationally. He was elected as from the original state of Tennessee as a House of Representatives in 1976, 1978, 1980, and 1982, and elected as a U.S. Senator in 1994 and 1990. He was also elected as the 45th Vice President of the United States on January 20 in 1993 and served for 8 years as a Vice President. In 2000, Mr. Al Gore won the electoral vote as a President of the United States, and in 2007, he was awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize jointly with the IPCC. He is the founder and chairman of the Climate Reality Project, a nonprofit devoted to solve the climate crisis, where more than 40,000 passionate climate leaders around the world are speaking and educating others about the climate crisis. And with that, I want to give the floor to former Vice President Al Gore.
Thank you, Jairo, and good evening, everyone. I am so grateful to be joining you today to help kick off some engaging conversations on the role that cities play in helping to solve the climate crisis and about innovations that are already transforming cities around the globe. So let me first extend my thanks to UN Habitat and to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy for organizing this important event. As you all know, the stakes have never been higher than they are right now. People living in your cities and people all around the globe are now experiencing the devastating impacts of the climate crisis, whether from stronger storms and bigger downpours, more destructive floods and mudslides, deeper and longer droughts, crop failures, strengthening wildfires, spreading tropical diseases, melting ice and the consequent sea level rise, acidification of the oceans, the loss of living species, and so much more. It's a long list, unfortunately. But the work you're doing right now is part of what gives me such a great amount of hope about our ability to solve this crisis. Where progress at the national level has sometimes stalled, cities have jumped in to lead the way. Thank you. And your work matters immensely. According to the United Nations Environment Program, cities contribute more than 70% of the global carbon emissions and consume 2/3 of the world's energy. By 2050, a full 2/3 of the world's population will live in urban areas. And we know that many cities are already experiencing some of the worst impacts of the climate crisis, exacerbating the already troubling rise of inequality in urban areas and elsewhere. But you know that despite these daunting trends, and indeed because of them, cities can be a major part of the solutions to the climate crisis. As you have observed in your own cities, urban innovations are contributing significantly to a reduction in emissions and are shifting us toward a sustainable future. And that progress is being driven all over the globe in ways that can be replicated elsewhere and adapted in other cities. I know there are many mayors with their teams participating today, and I want to urge all of you to not only look for ways you can collaborate with other cities around the world, but new ways to foster collaboration within your own cities. May I ask you to just look at the work happening in Atlanta? There, scientists and community leaders are working together closely to measure temperatures and better understand the disproportionate impacts of the so-called urban heat island effect. This is happening thanks, in part, to the tremendous leadership of Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who has not only prioritized climate action, but has acted upon her commitments. It's also happening because of the passion and dedication of leaders like today's MC, Jairo Garcia. Jairo co-founded the Atlanta chapter of my own organization, the Climate Reality Project, in Atlanta back in 2018, and since then has worked tirelessly to bring together scientists, policymakers, community organizers, innovators, and so many more to develop creative new strategies to combat the climate crisis. He is a mentor for many, a connector for more than 400 people working for climate action in the city of Atlanta. I encourage all of you to learn from leaders like Jairo, to learn from one another, and to explore ways to foster similar conversations and collaborations within your own cities. Indeed, innovation is all around us. And in order to win the climate fight and to win it in time to avoid the most catastrophic impacts, we have to take an all hands on deck approach. That means we have to harness all of the creativity and ingenuity that our communities have to offer. And there's a lot. It means thinking about how to make our buildings more efficient. It means incentivizing zero carbon modes of transportation. It means working to mitigate the terrible health and environmental impacts for low-income communities and communities of color, which all too often find themselves downwind from polluting facilities. As we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, which has hit cities especially hard, we have to invest now in a green recovery that will create jobs that by design cannot be outsourced. In planning your municipal budgets, remember that investments in green stimulus measures have been found to create 3 times as many jobs dollar for dollar compared to investments in traditional kinds of stimulus spending. These investments not only protect the health of our planet, but help to create healthier and more prosperous communities, more sustainable communities. We have the solutions we need. They're available to us now to help solve the climate crisis, but now is the time to scale up our efforts, to implement them with urgency. And for that, we have to work together. This, after all, is the most important year of the most important decade of action in our lifetimes. So now is the time. Let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Al Gore for his kind words. I want to mention very quickly before I give the floor to Honorable Mayor of Savannah about the 4 national climate assessment, which I call the IPCC in the United States. This organization is working with scientists from more than 13 federal organizations to measure the impact, risk, and adaptation in the United States. I wanted to mention specifically in the Southeast and the Caribbean, which are especially, as the National Climate Assessment mentioned, is exceptionally vulnerable to sea level rise, extreme heat events, hurricanes, and decrease on water availability. In these national climate assessments, there were 2 findings. One is the key message number 1, in the southeastern cities are particularly vulnerable to climate change compared with cities in other regions, and expected impacts to infrastructure and human health. And the second message was the one that we're going to be talking with the mayor of Savannah, is the increase of flood risk in coastal and low-lying regions, which is the case of the biggest port and the most important city in the state of Georgia. And with that, I want to give the floor to the Honorable Van Jones, second mayor of Savannah. He served 3 consecutive terms as the district council, and he served in the board of directors of the National League of Cities. He earned undergraduate and graduate degrees from Savannah State University and Georgia Southern University, and he received an honorary doctoral degree from Savannah State University. And with that, I want to give the floor to the Honorable Van Jones second.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia, and to all of you. We bring you greetings from the 1st District of the 13th colony of these United States, beautiful Savannah, Georgia, and I am so honored and privileged to have the opportunity to be with you. Thank you, Mr. Garcia, for the invitation, and thank you, Vice President Gore, for your important remarks today, and for truly being the inspirational climate leader that we have needed in our community, and the leadership you provided around the world for the past decades. You were talking about climate change when no one was talking about it. I also want to welcome my fellow mayors, my good friend, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms of our capital city of Atlanta, Georgia, and Mayor Jane Castor of Tampa, Florida. I would also like to extend a sincere thank you to the UN Habitat and the Global Covenant of Mayors for bringing together this diverse international convening of people from across sectors and across generations to explore innovative climate crisis solutions from cities around the globe, and the opportunity to connect, to listen, and of course, to learn. I want you to know that cities are on the front line of climate impacts while simultaneously facing health, equity, and economic challenges, the likes of which we have not seen in a generation or more. And we know that time is not on our side. And we know that everyone, mayors, state and federal governments, leaders, CEOs, faith and community leaders, that we all have to do more to meet the scope and the scale of this challenge. This is a pivotal moment for our climate and for our world. We must commit to bold and ambitious action, impacting climate that leads to a healthier, more just, equitable, and resilient future. Like many of you, we are at the forefront of this challenge, and mayors are leading the way. It is why we are committed to a green and equitable recovery from the pandemic that focuses on the most vulnerable communities directly impacted by climate change and recognizes that economic growth and environmental stewardship go hand in hand. And that is why we are working together to uphold the goals enshrined in the Paris Agreement and to create a 21st century clean energy economy. Globally, we are all experiencing impacts of climate change in the form of more storms, more floods, more fires, and other natural disasters than ever before. And the intensity of these events are getting stronger and more costly in dollars and in impacts to human health and to our local ecosystems. In Savannah, Georgia, our perspective is no different. We are a low-lying, although beautiful coastal community, but Savannah is directly affected by the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. From 2016 to 2018, Georgia experienced 4 hurricanes in each of those 4 years and 3 mandatory evacuations in those 4 years. The previous evacuations that Savannah has experienced was in 1999. We have been fortunate for the last 2 years, thank God, that we have not had to evacuate because during a pandemic, but around the globe, each hurricane season is getting more and more severe. Major flood events are increasing in Savannah due to the occurrence of more intense storms and rising sea levels. In fact, 70% of our major flood events along the Georgia coast have occurred since 2015. 70% of our major flood events have only been since 2015. We're also experiencing more days of extreme heat in Savannah. And since 2016, we have averaged 3 weeks of extreme heat days per year. That's 105 degrees heat index or higher. Very, very hot. And it's because of these major impacts to our city and our residents that on the cusp of our community response to COVID-19, our city council unanimously passed a resolution to achieve a 100% renewable electricity community-wide by 2035 and net carbon neutrality by 2050. It's bold, it's big, but it's necessary. This last year, we have been focused on developing the city's first energy transition roadmap to help reach these ambitious goals and created with direct involvement and guidance from our residents. It is called the 100% Savannah Plan, and we are eagerly anticipating the final draft of this plan to be ready by the end of the year. You, of course, cannot talk about the work on climate change or clean energy without also talking about racial and social equity. That is why the city has launched a task force that's focused on racial equity and leadership, made up of representatives from across the public, private, and community sectors, including housing, health, education, and job access. So it's an exciting time in our community. This past Friday, we had Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, here in Savannah, walking in some of our more challenged neighborhoods, talking about clean energy. We're excited about it. That's why we are now at this exciting intersection of these two major initiatives, climate and equity. And this is an exciting moment in Savannah's history. So as a city organization, we will not ask residents to do what we would not be willing to do ourselves. We have to practice what we preach. And the city of Savannah is currently working to make city operations more energy efficient. We are transitioning to an electric fleet and adding the charging infrastructure to support it. We are making our building operations more energy efficient and healthier. We are building alternative transportation networks for pedestrians and bicyclists. And we will soon be adding solar panels to many of our facilities. But more importantly, being at these crossroads of climate and equity is why we at the City of Savannah are dedicated to our most vulnerable and burdened residents. It is why we are developing an energy pipeline to assist and address minor home repair issues, followed by energy efficiency and residential renewables. It is why we are working with community partners to build workforce training in these green sectors to promote a healthier and wealthier community that is more resilient. It is why we are working with our partners locally, regionally, and nationally to advocate for policies that pave the way rather than create roadblocks to a just and equitable energy transition. There is much, much, much more to do. Climate impacts don't recognize political boundaries. Therefore, we must work in deep and intentional collaborations across those boundaries to mitigate and innovate in the face of these challenges. We must partner with our schools and research institutions. We must take advantage of their incredible wealth of knowledge to provide cutting-edge services, cutting-edge science, innovative research and expertise that can be applied to our communities. We must also recognize the role that our future leaders, our youth, play in this process. We must empower them. We must listen to them and then work together with them to build a better tomorrow. And believe it or not, they're way far along than we are. But we also know the incredible benefits of the work before us. cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner soil, improved human health. Exciting new areas of research and development, new economic sectors that translate to opportunities for people to learn new skills, improve wages, and improve their quality of life. That ultimately, even in the face of these great challenges, we are building a world that is more economically, socially, and environmentally resilient. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and share, particularly with the great mayors in Atlanta and Tampa, with Vice President Al Gore, and to all of you. This is the work of the day, and I appreciate the opportunity of being able to say hello. Thank you.
Mayor Johnson, thank you so much for your inspiring words. You gave a wonderful speech a few months ago at the Georgia Climate Conference, and it was the most inspiring speech I've ever heard in my life. So thank you so much for your leadership. You are demonstrated that connection that we need from people that like myself and Dr. Cobb that work in the academia, but also the job that the organizations like Partnership for Southern Equity and others are working interlinking between climate change and social issues. So thank you so much for your kind and wise words. We really appreciate it. With that, I would like to thank you again, Mayor Johnson, for your leadership. Honorable Keisha Lance Bottoms is the mayor of Atlanta, Georgia. She served in all three branches of the government. She was a judge. She served as Atlanta City Council member, and now she is the mayor of Atlanta. Her focus is equity and affordable housing, and she has an undergraduate degree from Florida A&M University and earned her Juris Doctoral from Georgia State University College of Law. With that, Mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms.
Hello, I am Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, and it's a pleasure to join you for the Innovate for Cities Conference. I know firsthand the impact that climate change has on people each and every day. Whether it's an increase in the rates of asthma, catastrophic flooding, skyrocketing electric bills, climate change is a real global crisis that has hit home for people everywhere. Fundamentally, it is a human rights issue, and it's the source of vast inequities within our city and around the world. In Atlanta, we've taken a multifaceted approach to environmental sustainability. We are on track to fulfill our commitment of 100% clean energy by 2035 using energy efficient and renewable energy sources, including solar and wind power. We are the proud home of America's largest food forest, which provides fresh, healthy foods to Atlanta neighborhoods previously considered food deserts. And we are currently working with academic and community partners like Spelman College to map the urban heat island effect so that we can better understand how climate change disproportionately affects our most marginalized communities and help alleviate their burden. Environmental sustainability is a complex and intersectional issue that will continue to require bold ideas and innovative solutions. The City of Atlanta is committed to the tenets of the Paris Agreement and to working with climate mayors to make our city, our country, and our planet a more equitable place for everyone.
Thank you to Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms for her talk about the issues of climate in Atlanta. And now we'd like to give the floor to Honorable Jane Castor, Mayor of Tampa. Mayor Castor spent his lifetime in service in the community as a police officer and the first Tampa's female chief of police. Mayor Castor has a degree from the University of Tampa. And with that, I want to give floor to Ariana. Ariana, we cannot hear it.
Sorry about that.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tampa Mayor Jane Castor, and I would like to welcome you to the 2021 Innovate for Cities Climate Conference. Tampa is the best city in the world because of our quality of life. We love being so close to our top-rated beaches, but of course, living this close to the water comes with a threat of storms. We're taking action now to understand and manage sea level rise, intense rain events, and cycles of drought. The city of Tampa recently issued a $50 million green bond for our stormwater systems. That means we're using green infrastructure to holistically manage stormwater systems. Examples include features like pervious pavement, rain gardens, and more to store and treat water before it goes back into the bay. We're also raising pumps and mechanical equipment and changing building codes to ensure we protect our citizens for generations to come. Many thanks to the UN Habitat and the Global Covenant of Mayors for organizing this important event. Here in Tampa, our sustainability and resiliency journey is just beginning, but I believe Tampa's best days are ahead of us.
Thank you to the mayor of Tampa for sharing her words about all the fantastic work that they are doing in the city of Savannah. I'm sorry, in the city of Tampa. So with that, our next section for the conversation on tonight is two of the regional curators in North America. Dr. Kim Cobb with the Georgia Institute of Technology and Alicia Scott with Partnership for Southern Equity. Dr. Cobb, she's a scientist and faculty director of the Global Change Program. Her research focuses on observations of past and present climate to advance our understanding of future climate change impacts. She's the lead author of the IPCC 6th Assessment Report, and she is the mother of 4. Alicia Scott with Partnership for Southern Equity manages all the aspects of the just energy portfolio across multidisciplinary sectors, which include the equitable consumption and distribution of energy, utility, clean energy advocacy, environmental justice, and climate change. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I welcome Dr. Cobb and Alicia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia.
So the first question, I'm going to ask this question for Dr. Cobb. Dr. Cobb, you have been working for quite some time with this, specifically with the city of Savannah, and now you're working with Urban Heat ATL. We are working and have the big honor to work with you here in Atlanta, tracking heat island effect. And then you listen to the mayor of Savannah. The mayor is new, so your research has been prior he took office. But tell us more about your work in Savannah and the work that you are doing here in Atlanta and your collaboration with both cities.
Well, thank you so much, Jairo, for having this amazing event tonight that showcases just how much cities are a part of the climate solution. So an honor to follow all of those honorables who spoke previously, truly. And I'll be brief here in just really thanking Mayor Johnson as well as Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms for their support of these really multi-partnered collaborative spaces between Georgia Tech, Spelman College, the City of Atlanta, Partnership for Southern Equity, and the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance for a project called Urban Heat ATL, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then in Savannah, really excited to work on a project that's much longer, about 3 years running now, called Smart Sea Level Sensors, which is a kind of a similar style partnership between Georgia Tech, Savannah State, UGA, the City of Savannah, as well as the Chatham Emergency Management Agency, and community organizations, including the Harambe House and the Pinpoint Betterment Association, of the current Gullah Geechee community. And so, you know, when we think about how we can bring climate findings into communities and achieve lasting impact, We have to think about the short-term challenges that communities face with the kinds of climate shocks that Mayor Johnson alluded to, and that, of course, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms also no stranger to here in Atlanta, in the form of extreme heat that is a year-on-year challenge for so many of our low-income marginalized communities of color. And so when we think about the challenge of now, we have to bring into the table the historic challenges that have brought these vulnerabilities to the fore and really shaped the vulnerability of these communities over decades. And so that requires, working way outside the bounds of my wheelhouse as a climate scientist, for example, and thinking about working with social scientists, but also most importantly in these two projects that I'm so honored to be a part of, listening to the community members themselves as local experts of their lived experience, and really thinking about what has made them so resilient over decades, and how can we learn from that and learn from where they want to be in the next 10 years to help connect the dots between all of the global scale climate modeling, the challenges that they're facing today, including all of the breadth of those challenges, and try to think about what's possible and try to think about the knowledge gaps that are preventing us from taking action, as well as the disparities in power and access that have prevented communities from getting the solutions that are so urgently needed. So that's where I guess I'd leave it for now, just to note that the community partners are critical, the academic partners are critical, and the municipal and governmental partners are critical. And that's when we have this sweet sauce where we can think about leveraging all of the available assets that are around the table and thinking collaboratively and holistically about the climate of now, the climate of next year, and of course, the climate in the next decades. All of that has to be in our vision, and it's possible, but obviously I really have to sit down and think deeply about where we want to be and how we got where we are. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cull, for your wide response about the question. This question is for Alicia. So Alicia, you are the manager of the GS Energy Circle with Partnership for Southern Equity. And then you're gonna have your own session here in this conference on Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Whoever is listening this today, please don't miss the GS Energy Circle conversation on Friday with Dr. McLean and with other members of the GS Energy Circle. And I've been member of the GS Energy Circle for quite some years, and it's one of those organizations that I adore because the fantastic job that you guys are doing. So can you give us a brief note about the GS Energy Circle, what you guys do, what is the intersection between the work that you are doing and what the Mayor Johnson was mentioning, and Mr. Al Gore and Dr. Cull?
Yes, so the Just Energy Circle, which is convened by the Partnership for Southern Equity within our Just Energy portfolio body of work, is a collaborative organization convening between NGOs, community groups, grassroots organizations, scientific community, academicians, and of course, members from the community. We are organized around primarily the equitable burden and distribution of energy utility across the American South, as well as environmental justice, racial equity, climate change, and clean energy advocacy. We work primarily to benefit the community members. One of the core operating principles at the Partnership for Southern Equity is that we believe that those closest to the problem have the best recommendations for the solutions to the problem. And we frame that around something called values-based organizing. We have organizers in the Savannah area, which is where I lived for my primary residency in Georgia since I've been here now for 10 years. I lived in Savannah for 9 years, and I'm very familiar with the great work that Mayor Van Johnson does down there. But we advocate around the community and what is hurting those vulnerable and marginalized frontline communities first, and the worst. And we work to help these grassroots organizations build capacity so that they can have the resilience to solve the problems that are impacting them the most. We work, of course, with the AUC Center. We've got some work with partners on a community solar and microgrid program there so that we can sort of get some of those resources in the energy planning that the Public Service Commission is charged with into the hands of the communities. Recently, I personally have been introduced to the urban heat islands. And Dr. Cobb, I've seen you speak at another conference earlier in the year. I think I've heard you speak a couple of times on the urban heat islands, and it has been wonderful. There's an indirect piece of advocacy that will be going into the 2022 Integrative Resource Planning with, and that is we are adamantly against extractive and environmentally dangerous energy production systems created by biomass. And I see that the biomass extraction in places specifically like Savannah are contributing to the urban heat islands because of the destruction and the extraction of the lumber and trees. Biomass is supposed to be lumber waste, but instead we see all up and down Highway 16. If you ever drive to Savannah from Atlanta, which I do often because I still have family and a residence there, all of the trees have been cut down. The huge thicket of trees and all across West Savannah, which is the primarily Black community in that area, has fallen prey to biomass. Those are the types of things that PSC and the Just Energy Circle educates community members on, that they may not understand the type of environmental racism and structural racism that a community may not, they don't have the energy or the bandwidth to focus on such esoteric issues as why are they cutting down the trees in my area? Because they're busy concerned about other things. They're busy concerned about dry weather flood events, which we know happen along Highway 80 going to Tybee Island. Those events are happening more and more. And so they're not thinking about those things. And we try to connect with the community through another one of our programs called the Just Energy Academy and educate community members on what they should be looking for when it comes to those extractive policies that will create disparate impact due to climate change.
Thank you so much, Alicia. So you mentioned that you are originally from Savannah. I didn't know that. Or you live in Savannah for quite some time. So during the time that you were there and you still have family there, how is the community taking the issue of climate change? Mayor Johnson mentioned that the city has been evacuated 3 times in the last 5 years. How is the morale? How the people in Savannah are coping with the storms and the problems of intensity of hurricanes and sea level rise in Savannah?
Well, one of our organizational partners, Dr. McLean, who is executive director of Harambe House, she is on the front lines of climate resilience, workforce development, disaster preparedness, weatherization of buildings, and retrofitting. So she does wonderful workforce development training around that and training for communities for resilience. The community has a lot of issues in Savannah. As we know, as Mayor Johnson introduced it, it was the 13th colony, and it's been very much one of the most difficult cities across the American South to really get them prepared for this climate change. Again, that's one of those esoteric issues that communities who have a 20% poverty rate, you really don't have time to think about climate change and how it affects you because you're trying to figure out, one, how to pay your energy bill. So we're trying to work to mitigate those economic stressors so that the community can focus on climate resilience. It floods almost regularly in Savannah when there's a hard rain. And so getting federal dollars to cities like Savannah is imperative. I work with the Rural Power Coalition. PSC is a member of that coalition, and we recently had a series of Senate aid conversations about allocating funds to those coastal impact communities so that they can do highway repair, highway and infrastructure repair. Those are some of those are just the tip of the iceberg. I don't know that they're even ready. And I'm so glad to hear Dr. Cobb works heavy on the urban heat islands. I don't think we've even touched on that in the city of Savannah, not in the way we have in Atlanta. And I always say this, when I moved from Savannah to Atlanta in 2019 and took this job with the Partnership for Southern Equity, my job here in Atlanta, working with all the luminaries and academicians, was to educate the group that I worked with that, you know, there's Atlanta and then there's the rest of Georgia, and we can't ignore the second busiest port city on the Eastern Seaboard. And I've been working very hard to try to deploy knowledge, resources, education, and capacity building to the Savannah area, because that is really what we need. And we're working on doing that through our Justice 40 Accelerator, which is designed to help those grassroots communities tackle things like climate change.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Dr. Cobb, you've been working for, as you mentioned, quite some years in the sea level rise in Savannah. And obviously, you know, they are having to evacuate the city constantly. All the data that you are collecting in order to educate decision makers. And we see right now the leadership of Mayor Johnson. With the scientific data, we see the work the partnership is doing in the region, and we do scientific data, all those integrated. How can be this an example for other cities? Is there is a hope in Savannah that it's going to be okay? How we can feel about all this effort that is taken in the city of Savannah with all these organizations?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of momentum going on. And so while our project, Smart Sea Level Sensors, is very much focused on kind of resilience and planning tools and engagement of the community, Mayor Johnson is rightly highlighting the leadership that has come out of his administration, also here in Atlanta, to tackle things that fall into the mitigation side, the emissions reduction, environmental and climate justice, energy burdens, energy poverty. These two things are not completely separate because, you know, as the Biden administration has helped highlight, when you tackle insufficient housing and energy burdens, you keep people safe and you save greenhouse gas emissions. And so, you know, there are some great intersectional spaces there. But speaking specifically to our work down in Atlanta, you know, it's amazing how much conversation can pop up around leveraging technology to help people on the ground, you know, in the communities where they live. And so I think, again, people just experience a disconnect between all those projections that rain down on them from these assessment reports, like the one that, you know, we just wrapped up in the United Nations that I was a lead author on, and you know, their daily lives and what's happening in their communities. And so one of the powerful elements that I think is a kind of a lasting lesson to come of the traction for sea level sensors and the traction for urban heat ATL is collecting the data at the scale that people live and the communities that they're invested in, maintaining the health and vitality of not just tomorrow, but for decades to come. And so that's really been the powerful lesson from a kind of a science and technology perspective. But that's actually about more technology in social context than, you know, a technology solution out there that you can, you know, parachute in and expect to work. It's about, it only takes root in the context of partnerships, in the context of culture, in the context of politics, on the ground where people are working and playing and living every day. And so that's another key lesson here. Yes, it's great to get this hyper-local data into the hands of decision makers, but it's really about building capacity at the community level for making data-driven claims about their future and what they need right now. And, you know, there's data and gigabytes and terabytes of data, you know, streaming through our hands all day, every day. But when you think about the kinds of data that are moving the needle at the national scale or the state scale or the local scale, you know, those ability to make those kinds of data-driven claims is a really important component in our data obsessed as society right now. And so that's another part, is to think about how these data are used and towards what purpose. And the explicit aim of the hyperlocal data that we're generating is absolutely to be proactive about climate policy and planning that will lead to a more just and equitable outcomes for these marginalized communities, these frontline fence line communities. So yeah, all of that is kind of an arc, if you will, to summarize, between really, transformative technology, but the transformation is really in the arc to impact action and engagement with community members, not for them, right? With community members as driving partners from day zero. And that I think is the lasting lesson for some of how we can harness this technology and science in service to climate justice and really true lasting climate solutions at the community level.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cobb. For those that missed this morning talk about urban heat ATL, I recommend you to go back. It's recorded. Just watch this amazing conversation with Dr. Cobb and Dr. Osborne and then the sustainability director for the city of Atlanta in this amazing project that I've also mentioned it's an honor for me to work in this project with Dr. Cobb, is the urban heat ATL. But you were mentioned about the data and working with the people. But can you briefly describe, which to me is something that I'm really passionate about, is the science community approach that Urban Heat ATL is taking, that basically is telling the community that, as you said, we're not going to collect the data and give it to you. You're going to work with us in order to collect the data, and you're going to work with us to find the solutions. So can you tell us, for those who missed this morning, the Urban Heat ATL this morning, a briefly note about the project and what are the expectations for the community of Atlanta? Mayor Barnes mentioned the project, especially the work with Dr. Nataki Osborne. So can you please tell us a little bit more about it?
Sure. So, this is a community science-based platform to collect temperature data about temperature extremes at a, basically as a block by block by block level. Actually, we collect data every 1 second. So we have community scientists that are holding very low cost temperature sensors, and they have talking to their smartphone, and they're collecting this temperature extreme data as they navigate their environment, whether by walking or bike. And so all of this data is going to servers that are helping to understand where these temperature extremes are. And this is important because in an urban environment like Atlanta and Savannah, Alicia, I'd take your call out to get working on Savannah urban heat islands as well. Huge problems, of course, in any urban area. And this is not just our southeastern cities, although I should note we have larger concentrations of more vulnerable populations here across the entire Southeast. But to realize that there are heat islands across the entire city that elevate temperatures about 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit above surrounding areas. But then there are heat islands and heat islands and heat islands down to the level that you and I experience walking across a parking lot, for example, versus walking through a tree canopy in a very small urban green space. And so it's these kinds of scales of differences that this project is aimed at really recovering and lifting up, because it's these kinds of pockets of systematic extremes across the urban landscape that we would think, city managers and planners need to know about to, of course, be proactive about urban planning and programs that can keep marginalized communities safe. Those are the folks who are bearing the brunt of these urban climate extremes. And there's Nataki Osborne-Jelks, my co-lead on this project, spoke very eloquently about what we're seeing from other cities that have undertaken this kind of analysis, a high correlation between the hottest temperatures in the urban environment and historic redlining, which has left its mark in the form of reduced tree canopy, more impervious surface, and generally a disinvestment in those communities over decades has led them literally to be much hotter than surrounding areas. And so this is concerning because, of course, these are the very communities that today are the marginalized communities, the frontline communities that are experiencing these impacts acutely, and obviously oftentimes can't reach for that air conditioning knob to keep themselves safe because they also have high energy burdens and high levels of energy poverty. And so, this is the space that we work in. And so we like to think of it as, we're collecting this amazing data with these 100 or so volunteers all across Atlanta. These are Georgia Tech students, these are Spelman College students, and these are community scientists who are affiliated with the West Atlanta Watershed Alliance, who are invested in their future, in their neighborhoods, in their communities getting better through time. And so it's through their energy, and so they deserve all the thanks here, really not us. But the long game is to really think about starting conversations about these intersections. It's not just about trees. It's about housing stock, and it's not just about housing stock, it's about energy rates and access. It's about health, public health metrics that make people predisposed to heat illness and death when there are temperature extremes. So there's not a simple answer to any of this, but we do believe by having these conversations and lifting up this data and really not stopping at just the data, but drawing through to policy impacts, working with people like the Partnership for Southern Equity to lift up the issues where we can help each other achieve common goals here. That's what we're aimed at. So again, honored and so humbled to be working with this very large team of collaborators across different sectors, all aimed at the same outcomes together. And again, with deep thanks for the 100 or so community scientists out there doing the mapping for us. We have now 1 million data points, over 280 hours of cumulative urban heat mapping in our data right now. So we're beginning to see some very interesting things emerge. Thanks for the opportunity to expand, Dr. Garcia.
Thank you, Dr. Kav. And you mentioned very important points related to energy and the use of air conditioning. I was in several months ago in a meeting, and they said, why people don't use air conditioning and it's so hot? People don't understand. Some people don't understand that some people cannot afford to pay the air conditioning, and they turn the air conditioning off when they need it the most, because the prices of electricity are so high, and the energy burden, as Dr. Cobb mentioned here, in specifically in Atlanta, is enormous, and the state of Georgia, the bills are one of the most expensive electric bills in the nation. Partnership for Southern Equity, Just Energy Circle is talking about that. It's about that equity in energy not only production but also consumption. And so the people I mentioned this morning that there is an article in the New York Times that people die more in New Orleans after the Ida hurricane. They die for the heat, not because the storm. So the heat are killing people. And then because people cannot afford electricity, or they don't have reliable electricity. So tell us a little sneak previews of the conversation on Friday, Alicia, and tell us the Partnership for Southern Equity, how the Partnership of Southern Equity can work with legislators in order to be sure that the state of Georgia and hopefully the rest of the world follow what the Georgia is doing related to just energy and affordable and clean energy for all the citizens.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garcia, for lifting that question up. One of the things that we're working on now is putting out a legislative agenda on legislation that we support. One of those key items is going to be an income-based payment program. We have to figure out how to make these energy burdens and the ratepayers, these huge bills, we've got to figure out a way to help our low to moderate income, our LMI communities pay for this. Right now, for those of you who may not know, in my previous life, I was a financial services executive. And we now have the highest population over the age of 65 that we've ever had in the history of the United States. What that means to all of this is that our elderly who are on fixed incomes, who are living on pensions, who are also living in paid for very, very old housing stock are a large chunk of this energy burden, disparate energy burden community. So we know that the elderly are most vulnerable, children and the elderly. Second in line, of course, is our low wealth communities and our historically marginalized communities of color who may have substandard and very, very old housing stock. One of the things we're trying to do is work with organizations, partner organizations like the Harambe House on retrofitting and weatherization, because there's nothing we can do about the fact that a lot of the houses in Savannah are over 100 years old. I live in a house in Atlanta that you couldn't tell on the outside that it was, it's 61 years old, built in 1960. I just had to redo all of my cast iron plumbing. I didn't even realize they did cast iron plumbing, but we had a sewage problem. The house I lived in before that was built in 1932. And so there's a lot of that are contributing to these urban heat islands and causing a lot of these heat related deaths. But more importantly, it's causing disparate and high energy bills. People in Georgia are paying upwards of 38% of their monthly income. Now, when you think about that, for some of you who are out there watching, mom and dad are on their fixed income pension, and sure, $3,000 sounded really, really great when they started that job back in 1965. We now know that a $300 energy bill is 10%. Of mom and dad's income, and after taxes, it may even be more than that. So we've got really disparate impacts on energy burden across the Black Belt as a whole, and the jobs of cities and their elected leaders is to make sure that they are engaging with their state and federal legislatures around the data that is provided from the scientific community like Dr. Cobb and like Dr. Nataki Osborne-Jelks. This data means a lot to us. We're the experts. We're the subject matter experts. We can't assume that our local municipal elected leaders even understand it. And so Partnership for Southern Equity is working. We're in the nascent stages of legislator education sessions. It's wonderful to go to the community, but we have to remember that those decision makers need just the same level of nuanced education. I was at a town hall with Georgia Wan on Monday, and I said, we can't assume that our senators understand this work. I had a call with Senator Warnock's senior aide who sits on the Agricultural Committee. He wasn't aware that there are 90 electrical membership cooperatives across Georgia and that they service 44% of Georgia's population. He wasn't aware that there were that many concentrated here. And so that led me to understand that while we are all talking about this climate change issue, we've taken for granted that the people that we've elected just have absorbed this information by osmosis. And they absolutely haven't. It is up to us to understand that the same, just like the community are pretty much lay people to some of these issues, so are most of our elected leaders. So we can't hold them accountable if we, the subject matter experts, haven't taken the time to actually break this down into digestible information. Elected leaders like Mayor Johnson, he has a cacophony of issues that he's working on. He's got the port, he's got poverty, he's got transportation, he's got infrastructure. Now he's got sea level rise and climate change and the biomass industry. So he's fending off, 10 issues every day, all day. It's up to us to leave behind what I like to call those one sheets that help educate what I refer to as the grass tops. Those are our elected leaders at the local level. They need to understand why these data points matter and who we should be talking to. And then we have to take that to our federal delegation, our congressional delegation as well.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I want to ask one last question. I asked this question this morning to Dr. Cobb, but hopefully we can take it a little twist after the intervention of the mayors. But I'm going to start with Alicia. Alicia, you work, I mean, I work close with you and I see you work tirelessly, and we appreciate enormously all your work. You are very passionate about that, and with this fantastic organization, there is the Partnership for Southern Equity, in very complex issues, which is, you know, is racism, is poverty, is you know, decades of repression, the energy, big issues. It's a big topic. But when you woke up in the morning, do you have hope that we're going to fix this crisis from the equity and social perspective? If there is hope, or not, or definitely we are doomed. What is your taking?
Oh my, well, I don't want to say that we're doomed. We're past the tipping point. We all know this. We know by the IPCC report that just came out this year. It is a code red for humanity. It is a code red for humanity. But I do believe there is hope that we can help these communities and help communities become resilient. I wish that it didn't take this long in our modern history for us to get serious about climate change. But yes, I have hope that we can solve these issues and that we can mitigate the overall, what I like to call now is the collateral damage for decades of putting more money into global wars than protecting humanity. So yes, I do believe there's hope. I believe there's hope with brilliant minds like Dr. Cobb, who's working on data points. I think that this new era in data and data collection is so key, so germane, and so timely. We need that. We need to see these visualizations of how these things are impacting us. So with wonderful women at the forefront of this issue who understand what it is we need to look for. And I think, you know, I wish we could have more women in decision-making spaces, because we know how to get down to the nitty-gritty and needle a topic until you understand exactly where we're coming from. And so I love that there are so many brilliant women working in this environmental space. And because of that, I know that there's hope.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have also the leadership of leaders like Mayor Johnson. So yes, but two ladies as a mayors. I make many calls to mayors, and those two ladies, they say, yes, we want to do this. So we really appreciate it, but also, yes, absolutely, I see your point. So Dr. Cobb, I want to ask you from this perspective. You work with the IPCC AR6. So, and then as we all know, when we read the report, is there, you know, we are in the code red for humanity. So from that perspective, from the scientific perspective, is there a hope? Is there hope?
I mean, absolutely. The IPCC was very clear on that point, that if 1.5 degrees Celsius is our most ambitious goal for peak warming this century, we can hold it to that still. It's not slipped through our fingers just yet. That's a future we can work towards by mid-century, and that will have, you know, tangible benefits. Basically, you know, very soon, within a matter of decades, we'll be seeing different worlds emerge from the trajectory that we're on and that which I believe we will be on. So yes, absolutely, we can minimize this damage and make sure that we're not handing over a baton to next generations. That is an impossible race to win. And so I am very heartened by that news, and that the whole system is turning around. It's just a little slow. So that's why it's so critical for cities to muscle up, like is articulated by these leaders tonight, and to help us bridge that gap. It's going to be grassroots. It's going to be international and national level policies that must be enacted. But those cities are going to be the glue that we desperately need to create communities that are, you know, really bringing America together and across this country and other major cities in other countries as well. So that's something that I think is so remarkable about the kind of we are still in movement that kept kept things moving over the last 4 years. And now look at us, the opening salvo of this administration so clearly pointed towards a just low carbon transition with all of their might. We will get there in this country. I'm very convinced of that now. And aside from that success or failure of those very ambitious bills making their way through Congress right now, the landscape for funding is really helping people come together in new and important ways and drive change on the ground. And so you think about the kinds of funding that's newly available in the landscape, both private and federal funding, to help accelerate progress, whether it's the just low carbon transition or just in resilient communities. It's really amazing. You can hardly find enough folks to scramble to these opportunities. So there's a pent up demand for this work, and people are recognizing right and left that they can be part of the solution in new ways. And so being at Georgia Tech, I look around at my colleagues and I see them asking themselves, how can I be part of this solution in new and impactful ways on the ground right now? And when you hear those kinds of questions, you think, okay, yeah, here, let's work on some things together. Let's help our own administration at Georgia Tech understand what we need to do as an institution to be part of the solution as well. So again, at every level, we see movement and engagement in action. And so it kind of should spur us forward. It is a winds at our back for the first time in many years this year. And of course, we hope they can bring it home in Congress. We hope they can bring it home in Glasgow, the big international negotiations. But even if we don't get everything that we should get and we deserve and we hope happens, this will continue, and there's acceleration to be had at every level. So that keeps me going year on year. This momentum is unstoppable.
Oh my God, this is so inspiring. Thank you so much. I would like to have, this was an inspiring session. Intervention of Mr. Al Gore, the intervention of the mayor of Savannah, Mayor Johnson, with the mayor of Atlanta, Mayor Buttons, with the mayor of Tampa, Mayor Castor, with these amazing speakers. Thank you so much, Alicia. Thank you so much, Kim. This was incredible, very inspiring. And I hope that everybody who watched this session get inspired like I did today. So thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody, for your attention. And I hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you.